Hello everyone, and here we are again. Today we're going to explain the human nutrition sort of chapter regarding grade 9 biology. Human nutrition here, when we want to talk about such thing, probably we won't be doing it as a normal lesson, more likely as general information during your lifetime. Because when we talk about nutrition, it's more likely as we're talking about general health. Nutrition here, the word nutrition, we would just classify it as anything that actually a person or human being intakes during his day. Like for an example, you would have people who mainly survive on chocolate, for an example, like me. Or you could have it like those who have stumbling sort of a diet, they tend to skip breakfast, just have like a greasy lunch, and they end up having their dinner lately and it causes them problems forwards. Or you will have those type of people who are very, very, very organized and they have like a balanced diet. Okay. When we're going to talk or get through the chapter, you will know here that what are the types of nutrition, what are the things that you should be focusing on, your food exactly, what does it consist of. So let's get started. As for human nutrition, you will have something called a balanced diet. The balanced diet here is that, what does it mean? It doesn't mean like someone is actually starving themselves and not eating properly, no. Because we said it's balanced, so practically you're taking the right nutrition's in correct proportions. For an example, if you're actually a child which your age is probably below 12 years old, your diet should be more focused on getting the exact amount of calcium, because you will need it. You're in a period of building your bones. Teenagers will focus more on calorie intake and adults on balanced meal with less calories, because when people start getting through their 20s and up to their 40s, 30s, they will start managing more and watching what they take in their body, because each one of them, if it goes beyond the normal, they will find themselves into severe problems. As for the pregnant woman, it will have its own or her own sort of minerals intake and all those. And as for males, and generally they require more energy, so you will find out that the male, a boy or a guy, they eat a lot because they require more energy than the girls or females in generally. Okay, but what are the nutritions that we should be taking? But before we go there, there's another thing that we need to know, a term which is called malnutrition. What is malnutrition? Remember when we said earlier that a person who has a good nutrition or generally intakes food is probably whether it's good or bad, but it's still he's taking food. The malnutrition, that means someone who's not getting the proper amount of food intake. So those, you will find them in impoverished countries, those sort of people who's not able to buy their food, who don't eat properly. So practically, it doesn't just exist in those countries in poverty only. You can still have a well-civil and wealthy sort of people, and they still can't eat properly because they have different intakes. For an example, someone who just eat small quantities, and those small quantities they are too small, they can't do that much difference to a person's body. So malnutrition here is a condition caused by eating unbalanced diet. We've got several forms. We've got overnutrition, which is a balanced diet but eating too much of everything. And we've got an undernutrition, having too little food and eating food in incorrect proportions. That means, for an example, you take a large amount of greasy food but such a tiny amount of proteins or minerals. The effect of malnutrition. Malnutrition also can be classified for those who actually have starvation, those who have been raised in such harsh circumstances, those kind of countries in poverty sort of states. So practically they will be starving most of the time. So when they actually starve, they lose their strength and finally die because of lack of food. So starvation is practically lack of food. We've got another disease related to the heart, which we call it coronary heart disease. The coronary heart disease is like eating too much fat, which are rich and saturated, that means full of fatty acid and cholesterol. They may lead to a heart attack. You know what happens when you eat greasy food? It's kind of like blocking the arteries, the blood vessels that actually take the blood to your heart. So practically here you're damaging your heart. And some people, like many of them around the world, it leads to a heart attack, like a sudden death because they had a heart attack and when they come and analyze the cause of death, they will find out that they had coronary heart disease by time. Another sort of malnutrition, which is called constipation. The lack of refuges and foods cause constipation because they're indigestible. Like we always recommend us as doctors, do please drink water. Like a normal range for you is like from 1.5 liters till up to 3 liters per day, but you can settle for 2 liters or 1.5 liters, but you have to, in order to avoid the constipation status. Obesity. Those who are I wouldn't really prefer the term fat, but more likely as chubby and more than chubby. Because you eat too much fat and carbs, that leads to the storage, and it's kept inside of your body mainly as a form of fat, causing you increase in your body weight. But this is very, very serious because it can cause you a heart attack, a stroke, you will have pain in your joints, and mobility impairment and high blood pressure. You will find yourself in severe problems. You're not going to, you can't practice your normal activities in a free way as you should be. Okay, here now we come to our favorite part, which is the nutrients, and each one of them, what do I use it for? For an example, carbohydrates. The carbs here, when I want to use them, what do I use them for? I use them for energy. Then where do I find carbs? I can find carbs in rice, pasta, those sort of food, bread. These are the main source of carbs, and it gives me energy. For fats, they're a source of energy, building materials, energy store, and insulation, and making hormones. The fats here, if it's the fats, I've got two forms of it. I have the solid state, which is fat or lipid, and I have the liquid sort of type, which is oil, like olive oil, sesame oil, coconut oil, all these sort of oils. Now we come to the proteins. The proteins here are very, very important for the body because it's like a building sort of a material and a source of energy, and it comes to as we said previously in the first chapter of the enzymes, that enzymes are proteins by nature. So when you don't take in proteins sufficiently, you will end up having a low rate of reactions inside of your body. Also, the hemoglobin, which is the one responsible for giving the red color or the red pigment for the red blood cells, and also it contains it's sort of like an enhancement for the oxygen, carrying the oxygen. Structural material for the muscles, and hormones and antibodies. Where do we find proteins? We can find them in fish, red meat, and veggies. For vitamin C. Vitamin C here, who doesn't know that we can find them in oranges, greenish veggies, especially pepper, the green pepper or colored peppers, those sort of And okay, then what does it help us to do, the vitamin C? It comes for the production of fibers and it protects cells from aging. That's why when you go for like cosmetic sort of products, you'll always find that vitamin C is one of them, because us like females, we always love to take care of our skin, and it like enhances the fibers and the collagen fibers to stay active and keep us like have a healthy skin. Vitamin D is very important for the bone, so we find it most likely from the sunlight, which is the absorption of calcium and depositing the calcium inside of the bones. The calcium here, development and maintenance of the strong bones and teeth. The iron, we need it. We can find it most likely in rocca, which is totally a greenish plant, and we can add it into our salad and eat it and still be making our hemoglobin. Also fiber, which helps the peristalsis and prevents people from having constipation, and water, which comes like, it makes up like almost 3/4 of our body, which helps to go into the chemical reaction, solve it for transport. Okay, here we come to a point of the deficiencies. That means the lack of. I'm not having enough of that sort of thing. What would lead me to? If I don't take in much vitamin C, I would end up with having a disease called scurvy, which means the loss of teeth, pale skin, and sunken eyes. Vitamin D also, if I'm not having that, I would have a disease called rickets, which means the weak bones and teeth. Calcium as well, I will end up having rickets, weak bones and teeth, and also poor clotting of blood and spasms. Spasms by mean like seizures. I'm not able, like everything's like kind of like stiff. Okay, now we come to the other part of here we still have got iron. Iron, when you're not taking enough food, that actually strengthens up your blood, so you will end up having something called anemia, which is less of iron, by means less of hemoglobin, less oxygen transported, less respiration and less energy. That's why when someone likes like, oh, I feel so dizzy today, once I was sitting, then I stood up, and then I feel like a bit dizzy and I can't like functionize in a proper way, and it's kind of like I'm pale and everything. The first thing they will tell you like to go to run a blood test, and when you run a blood test you will find out that your hemoglobin is less than the normal, so you start having like those kind of like iron pills, or you have to watch your diet to eat a proper diet. Now we go to the human alimentary canal, or the digestive system for the humans. You already had that in grade 7 and 8, and still we're going to take it for this year. Okay, the digestion itself, like it's the breakdown of large insoluble food molecules into small water-soluble molecules using mechanical and chemical process. Okay, let's start to know the first or the beginning of the alimentary canal, which we have the mouth, the salivary glands, the esophagus, stomach, small intestine, and each part of them. The mouth here contains the teeth, which is used for mechanical digestion area, which the food here is going to be mixed with the salivary gland secretions like the amylase, which is an enzyme, and the amylase here is like the function of it to break down the carbs into starch. The salivary glands produce, which contains amylase, and helps fluid slide down to the esophagus, which is here. This is the food over here, and the salivary glands, which is the saliva as a secretion, it helps the food to slip over here into the esophagus. The esophagus is a tube-shaped organ which is to transport the food from the mouth to the stomach. And then what happens to the food inside of the stomach is going to be mixed and grinded with the acid inside of the stomach and the enzyme to enable to break down the food into a simpler form. Okay, then we have the other part, which is the small intestine and the large intestine, and we've got the pancreas and the liver. Each one of them has its own function. As for the stomach, it has sphincters to control movement into, and also has pepsin as an enzyme, a protease, to break down the protein into peptides. It also kills bacteria with the hydrochloric acid. They also have elastic walls. As for the small intestine, tube-shaped organ composed of two parts, the duodenum and the ileum. The duodenum fats are emulsified by bile, because fats, as we know, that oil does not mix with liquid unless it has been emulsified by the bile and digested by the pancreatic lipase. It's another enzyme to form fatty acid and glycerol. So here, the simple form of the fats is actually fatty acid and glycerol. Like the carbs, the simple form of it, or the simple unit of the carbs is sugar, and proteins are amino acids or amino acids. The ileum, the maltase, another enzyme. Anything ends with an ase is an enzyme that breaks down the maltose to glucose. This is where absorption takes place and adapted by having a villi or a microvilli. Okay, we'll stop for now and continue the next time, inshallah.